Hi, and welcome to Books in Action. My name is Larry Petraccaro, and I have with me tonight Tina Kelley and Stan Litow. Tina and Stan have written a book, they've collaborated on a book called Breaking Barriers, How P-Tech Schools Create a Pathway from High School to College to Career. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and maybe the more ominous, not ominous, but serious implications that that such an approach may have on education. But first, a little introduction of both Tina and Stan. Tina Kelley is a poet who grew up in New Jersey and then took a rather circuitous route back to New Jersey. She attended Yale University and worked as a journalist in Seattle and Philadelphia. She is a former New York Times reporter who worked on the paper's Metro desk for 10 years and belonged to the team that won a Pulitzer Prize in public service for the paper's coverage of the September 11th attacks. She wrote 121 portraits of grief, brief profiles of the victims, which appeared in the book Portraits 9/11/2001. Her first book of nonfiction about homeless youth and how to keep young people off the streets was co-authored with Kevin Ryan, the CEO of Covenant House. Her first book of poetry, The Gospel of Galore, won a 2003 Washington State Book Award, and her second poetry collection, Precise, appeared in 2012 from WordPress in Cincinnati. Her poems have appeared in the Best American Poetry 2009, Southwest Review, Prairie Schooner, and the Journal of the American Medical Association, among other publications. Her latest book of poetry is Rise Wildly, and she has won the Maplewood Ideas Festival Literary Award in 2019. Stan Litow is a professor and innovator in residence at Duke University and is also an adjunct professor at Columbia University. He is the author of the book, The Challenge for Business and Society, From Risk to Reward, published by John Wiley & Sons in 2018. Stan is President Emeritus of the IBM Foundation and Vice President Emeritus of IBM's Global Corporate Citizenship Program. At IBM, he led the nation's most effective global corporate social responsibility program. He is also former Deputy Chancellor of Schools for the City of New York, where he created many innovative school reform efforts. Stan also served as a member of several high-level presidential commissions, including the President's Welfare to Work Commission and the President's Urban Affairs Council, as well as several gubernatorial commissions. His career as a leader and innovator in education, corporate social responsibility, economic development, and social services has been significant. In addition to his co-authorship of this book, he has authored book chapters for Brookings Publications, the Yale Law Review, MIT, and Oxford Press. He has also authored numerous opinion pieces for the New York Times, New York Daily News, Forbes, and other publications. Stan is a frequent speaker on critical public policy issues. Welcome to you both. And Stan, before we start on the book, what is an innovator in residence?
Well, at a school like Duke University, and I teach in the graduate school, the Sanford School at Duke, they're looking for innovative ways to make education more significant in broader areas of society. So as one example, this fall we'll be launching a new executive education program for corporate leaders around the United States and around the world to help them to understand how to better embrace and understand and practice corporate social responsibility. Not that companies shouldn't worry about their bottom line, but they need to worry about more than the shareholders. They need to worry about their community, their employees, and do it in a way that makes an impact on their supply chain practices, their environmental practices, diversity and inclusion, collaboration with not-for-profit organizations. And those kinds of innovations are things that really need to be done within the higher education sector. And that's the innovation that I'm involved with.
Okay, that sounds interesting, actually. And it also sounds in a way to be, I don't know if the word is holistic or what it is, but it seems like a very integrated approach to the whole concept of, you know, how you live your life in a way, how you get educated, how you, trying to find that way to make the corporate world understand that the responsibility doesn't just end at the bottom line. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
You both have a new book out titled Breaking Barriers, How P-Tech Schools Create a Pathway from High School to College to Career. So Tina, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us about it and how you see it, and then Stan, the same question to you.
Great. The book tells the story of PTech, which stands for Pathways in Technology, Early College High School, which is a transformative model of education, combining a public high school, a community college, and a business partner in a collaboration. There are now 266 of these, but it started in Brooklyn and Crown Heights 10 years ago this year. It's a 6-year high school model, so kids go from grades 9 through 14. They receive a free associate's degree from the community college, and from the business partners, they receive mentoring, tutoring, visits to the workplace, paid internships, and eventually, if they graduate, they're first in line for a job at the corporation. What's particularly interesting about the model is it's basically free for the public school district, and it brings in kids who come in basically through lottery. They don't have to do well in any particular entrance exam or get particular recommendations to get in. So it welcomes all kids, including those in special ed and those who are English language learners and those who don't do that well in 8th grade. A lot of the young people have graduated in under 6 years, and the ones that we've talked to have had real transformations in their school career. Some of them are working for IBM, which was the founding partner, and they're going on to work at a number of the other business partners who've joined in as the decade passed. And it's really made a difference to getting kids into careers with high growth potential.
Stan?
Yeah, when I came up with the initial idea for PTech in 2010, it was to solve two very, very critical problems. Number one is large numbers of young people across the United States were graduating high school, but they were not college ready, and they were not able to complete college, especially low-income young people, especially children of color. There was a pressure put on our school districts around the country to judge their success based upon high school graduation numbers, and they all went up in virtually every state. But college completion stagnated, and especially for low income and children of color, we're not turning out people with a college degree. And the second part of the problem is, as the economy was changing, the large number of jobs that were being created that were at competitive salaries all required post-secondary degrees. And the jobs that only required a high school diploma, started at minimum wage, tended to stagnate, and really did not provide any opportunity. So what was an opportunity was to come up with an innovation that would really change the dynamic and say, it's not going to be 9 to 12, it's going to be 9 to 14. And high school and college are going to be combined. And students would graduate not just with a high school diploma, but a competitive post-secondary degree, and also have the workplace skills that would be vitally important to building a career: problem-solving skills, writing skills, presentation skills. And at that point, when I was at IBM leading corporate affairs and the IBM Foundation for the company, we looked at 9 different entry-level job categories. All of them required a bachelor's degree. But if you got under the covers and looked at the skills that were required, they were all about problem solving. They were all about writing, presentation. They wanted people who were actually work ready. And what we said is we could build a model where students would actually get a high school diploma and a community college degree and be able to go into the workforce and or complete a longer degree, a 4-year degree or more. And that's what PTech did. And it changed the dynamic of what high school is in America. And now, as Tina said, 10 years later, we've seen it spread from one school across from a public housing project in Brooklyn, in a very distressed community, to spread to 266 schools across 28 countries, 12 states, and see it succeeding in anywhere and everywhere in the world. There are PTech schools that are successful in rural areas up by the Canadian border in New York. There are schools that are successful in Europe, Asia, southern states like Louisiana, northern states like Connecticut and Rhode Island. This is really a model that has promise, and that's why I think the book is so important.
Well, that brings up a question, among other questions, but is the, do we have to actually rethink education these days? I mean, has education become so traditional in the way we do it that we don't, you being an innovator in residence, obviously would, I presume, look at, maybe education in a context of what it's supposed to do, what the product is supposed to be, where in a traditional sense, you might only look at what the process is supposed to be. You're supposed to go for 12 years, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. So, I mean, how does the success that you've had, how does that get integrated into the, I'll start with you, Stan, and then you, Tina. How does that success get integrated into the public school community?
Yeah, well, I think what we know is that schools tend to be very traditional, and there are always examples in every community across the United States and around the world. You can find examples of a really high functioning school that's doing a great job, but they seldom go to scale and they seldom become sustainable. So they become one example of success, but it doesn't lead to that long-term scalable change. And what P-TECH did is it came up with this innovative model that we've just discussed, but it also came up with a way to get it to spread from one school to dozens of schools to hundreds of schools, and hopefully now with the book coming out to thousands of schools, because it eliminated the barriers in the design function. So if we sort of look at where education is America right now, it's very divisive. We've had people who have been hurling accolades, criticism at each other around the Common Core standards or around charter schools. And largely that is because there's resistance to innovation that leaves out key stakeholders. And one of the things that was critically important when P-TECH got going was to make sure that teachers were at the table so that teachers' unions would not be a problem. Principals were given an opportunity to innovate and create, so the principals weren't a barrier. Civil rights organizations were part of the panel, part of the discussion. The parent organizations, the community, the business partners. So when you got down to it, there were few barriers that would stand in the way of letting it spread from one school to a large number of schools. It wasn't like, a huge amount of private sector money. The example that we write about in the book of Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook coming in with hundreds of millions of dollars and trying for reform, but it doesn't go anywhere because the private money ultimately goes out and education is a public function. And the P-TECH example is not just building a model for an effective school, but thinking through how do you break down the barriers before they're constructed so that it becomes easier to move it from district to district, from state to state, from country to country. And that's what's, I think, innovative. It's not just a design that works, but it's creating the pathway to be able to take that design from geography to geography.
Well, we're going to have to take a break, but I'd like to follow up on that with you, Tina, when we come back. So if you'll stay with us up, we'll be back in a minute.
It's an onion.
Welcome back to Books in Action. This is Larry Petraccaro with Tina Kelley and Stan Litow. And we've been discussing the book, Breaking Barriers, How P-TECH Schools Create a Pathway from High School to College to Career. And at the end of the first segment, Stan was talking about the way that the P-TECH program was designed to be sustainable. And it was designed to be sustainable by breaking barriers among the, let's say, the traditionalist sort of educators. So Tina, coming to you, do we need to rethink education? Does the P-TECH approach, is it something that maybe we ought to be considering in a very universal level? And does it, to some extent, take education off the hook? Because obviously, what you guys said before is that especially the minority communities simply weren't being prepared for college. So whatever they were supposed to do after 12 grades didn't seem to be getting there. So what's your take on that, Tina, if I may?
Well, the country's school kids are no longer majority white. So we have to make sure as a nation that we are providing the best possible education to all kids. If we're failing the kids that we refer to as minorities, they're actually in the majority now, and it's just not going to work as a society. What I like so much about the P-TECH philosophy is that it brings really, really high expectations to kids. And I know at Columbia, there's been a discussion of an Instagram feed of Black at SOMSD, a list of account of students who talk about how their grown-ups in their schools have given them the lowest possible expectations. I've never expected them to take AP classes. I've never expected them to get into great colleges. They've always downplayed their dreams. And what P-TECH does is say, you're going to all finish calculus by grade 12. You're going to all get a free associate's degree in a really rigorous program, and we're going to support you in that. And they support the students with tutoring and mentoring, and also just these carrots of a free college degree, 2 years of free college, and a paid summer internship in the career of your, in the career that you're pursuing. All of those are great ways to keep kids engaged in their schoolwork. And I think if you can show kids a clear and supported pathway towards a future that they're interested in, it gets rid of a lot of behavioral problems, a lot of boredom. And I wish that we had a P-TECH in our district. There are 3 now in New Jersey, and I hope there'll be a great deal more as time goes on.
Well, if someone was to say that sounds like what vocational schools used to do, how would you address that? Or is that correct, or is that wrong? And let me start with you, Stan.
Yeah, I think what we had, vocational schools in the United States had a very, very bad rap of providing a separate door for young people who people determined at grade 8, 12 or 13 years of age, are not going to be able to go to college. And they're going to need a separate vocational education to be a plumber or to be an electrician or something like that, and that they can't possibly succeed. But the reality is that notion about vocational education, we can throw it out and we can come up with a different model that says it's not about a vocational skill, it's about a career. It's about the skills that you need and the credential that you need to have a real career. And when you look at the students whose story is told in Breaking Barriers, we have examples like Oscar Tandila. Oscar was way behind in grade 8 and never thought he'd graduate high school. And he got into P-TECH, and the next thing you know, he was on an academic trajectory of success where he had completed the 6-year program in 3.5 years, got a full scholarship to Cornell, and Oscar graduated with his bachelor's degree last week. And he wants to be an education reformer, or Mousseline Moussaïd, and also an immigrant young man not doing that well, gets into the program, and he graduated last week from SUNY in Stony Brook, and he's going to go to medical school. So the stories of the students are examples of just because you were not succeeding in grade 8, just because you were an immigrant, just because you were from a single parent, just because you were in a homeless shelter, all of these students given this opportunity, and as Tina said, the school culture in the building is you will succeed and we will help you succeed and provide those supports. And then at the end of the day, that very first school in Brooklyn, with almost 100% of the students being students of color, their college completion rates are about 400% higher than the national average. So that blows apart any preconceived notion about who can succeed. It says if we think about this in the right way and set up the kind of systems that will be operational in the right way, any student can succeed. And what that means is right now, if you go into the workforce with a post-secondary degree compared to somebody with only a high school diploma, you're going to earn 84% more over your lifetime. Just think about that. So do we want tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students to have those kinds of careers and have that kind of economic success, providing stability for our nation? I think so.
Well, Tina, to you then, what do you think are the barriers that prevent the public school system from providing the same kind of outcomes that P-TECH does?
Well, ideally, the public school systems across the state and across the country would adopt a P-TECH model so that each district had this form of education that kids who are interested in particular areas of study could go to. Our book includes lots of takeaways for schools as to how they can use some of the aspects of P-TECH that are particularly useful, but it's kind of like a cocktail, and it works best with all the ingredients working together. So when you have a business partner who's offering the worksite visits that are relevant to what the kids are learning at a given semester, it all works together well. And bring in the community colleges and have them see that these kids are all prepared and don't have to take any expensive remedial courses. That partnership really makes it work well.
Is that partnership, Stan, purely altruistic, or was there a corporate need that sent you down this path as well?
Without question, there was a corporate need. As we saw it, again, corporations had a skills crisis. They needed people with the right skills for high growth areas. When you look at a company like IBM, what they've got is a pipeline. Virtually every student that they've hired is a student of color with the right kinds of skills that they need. You know, one of the P-TECH schools in Newburgh, New York, students graduate with a degree, an associate's degree in cybersecurity, and they're hired by IBM in a heartbeat. And the schools in the P-TECH school in Buffalo, New York, are hired by Tesla because they have environmental skills. And the schools in Texas are hired by Thomson Reuters for a whole range of entry-level skills in a communications company. So what we've created is a model where companies like Corning, like Global Foundries, like IBM, like Tesla, have a pipeline to be able to get the best prepared young people who are diverse and meet their goals around diversity, but they do it in a way that also meets their skill requirements for high need opportunities. And we've got lots of examples. You know, I love the stories in the book there about the students. Shudan Brown, she's working for IBM in North Carolina. She grew up in Brooklyn. She already has her master's degree. She's on her way to getting a doctorate. And she couldn't have imagined that when she first got into P-TECH. And the skills that she has are valuable in the workplace.
Those stories are certainly, inspirational. When the two of you were doing the research or collaborating, putting the book together, was there anything you found in your working in collaboration to try to put things together that really surprised you? Tina, let me ask you first. We'll start with you.
I think the figure that surprised me most was when we would learn that 80% of the kids who graduated with their 6 years of high school and community college, 80% went on to a 4-year college. So for people who are saying, oh, this is just a vocational program and this is warehousing kids of color in some suboptimal school, it was really giving them 2 free years towards their 4-year degree. Most of them went on to college, and from there, the sky's the limit.
And how about you, Stan? Anything that particularly surprised you?
Yeah, I think, because when I started the program, I was at IBM, and IBM was the founding business partner. I think the thing that was exciting, surprising, and encouraging to me was the level of investment by other companies. Thomson Reuters last summer, in one of the schools that they're involved with, they hired 28 summer interns, and they offered jobs to 23 of the 28. And that's stunning when you think about it. Most employers, their internship programs are restricted to college students, and very often upper class college students. And here they are bringing students into their company in the summer between their junior and senior year in high school. But because the kids are graduating with both a high school diploma and an associate's degree, they're getting job offers at high wage, and large numbers of them are well prepared.
Okay, well, I think we're going to pretty much have to end it there, but it sounds like one of the secrets of success, at least as I interpret it, was the sustainability of the approach, was the way that you broke the barriers in trying to involve a total educational, not actually an educational community, but a total social community in neighborhoods. So it's probably a lot more to talk about, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So Tina, thank you. Stan, thank you. It was a wonderful discussion. I appreciate it very much. And I hope it can get replicated in a lot of places, because it sounds like it's doing what school is supposed to be doing. So thank you again for joining us. And thank you for joining us on Books in Action.